I was actually a part of the health unit. I was part of like a youth group, and we were doing like smoking and like mental health stuff. And um, I see a lot of people. They try to blame everybody. And our point for the smoking thing was to blame the companies, not the people. Like, you can't attack people and expect them to change. You have to like change the companies, not the. It's really hard to explain.
Yeah, I understand. Go on. Yeah.
But I'm not exactly how to like be an activist
Yeah.
for veganism. Like, there's so many different approaches, and I'm like, I don't know what to do.
Yeah.
Especially where I live, it's in the country, and there's not much stuff we can do. I don't know.
Yeah. Well, look. I mean, I think the big question that I kind of want to talk about more on my YouTube channel, because it's boring but it's really important, has to do with your commitment to the place. I make comparisons between veganism and smoking all the time. But the other kind of comparison I've made since the start of my channel is talking about vegan politics as opposed to going to City Hall, being involved with activism on local issues that way. In some ways, being in a small town is an advantage in that you can build up the trust of people and contacts with people locally. But the choice of where you are and whether or not you're really committed to that place is fundamental. In terms of my own political development, I went through a long series of stages before I really embraced what I would just call pragmatic politics, where I really made the decision in my life, look, what matters to me is whether or not the drinking water is poisoned, is whether or not, so Toronto was on a lake, all right? And at that time, this may have changed, but I doubt it, you could look at a map and be like, here is the tunnel that puts sewage into the lake, and here is the tunnel that takes in drinking water for the city. And they were so close together, what the city did was they built and they extended. There was a little like brick wall underwater. It doesn't even go up to the surface. There's like a little wall underwater to try to make the poo go off in one direction and the drinking water come in another direction. Like, you do not need an advanced degree in biochemistry to see what the problem is. Anyone could look at that map and see the reality of that. Oh, another thing I'll just mention that's interesting in terms of like the larger scale of ecological change. Toronto is built on a tiny, tiny river now, the Don River, that's just a trickle. There's like nothing there. There's a small park there and so on. A river that was destroyed ecologically. When Toronto was founded, that river was big enough to have steamboats going up it. So like old-fashioned Southern American South steamboats would carry people up this river, basically the whole length of the city as it exists now, from the lakefront up. The reason why the water level dropped so dramatically was deforestation. When you cut down the trees, you cut out the hydrological cycle. You reduce the amount of water being pumped through the ecosystem. To simplify slightly, and river levels drop. So in Toronto, nobody perceives these problems. They're invisible, although they're right in front of your face. Like, people cross over that river on a bridge. They drive their cars over the river. They don't see an ecological history. They don't see the devastation that's implicit in it, right? People drink water out of their tap every day. Really, in 5 seconds, they could look at a map and see that problem. So that, for me, this is before I became vegan. Back then, I was strictly vegetarian. I made a video talking about it. I'd really never even heard the word vegan, but I was pretty close to vegan in terms of what I believed in. I was already very close to vegan, and I refused to wear leather and stuff like that. But for me, it was really a turning point in my life where it's like, okay, I want to deal with real politics, and I admit it's a completely subjective definition. Like, what is real? And then what is real politics? It's not objective, it's subjective. But to me, I decided, look, there's all this kind of BS going on with, people holding signs in the streets and protesting. And in Toronto, there's a lot of very far left politics, extreme communism, that sort of thing. And people wanting to have opinions on issues they can't influence. So like an example, this is probably even true at your college, probably even at Sheridan College. There will be people protesting human rights in Israel, which is understandable. But if you live in southern Ontario, you cannot make an impact on human rights in Israel.
I really don't know anything about that. Like, I've never done any research. I don't.
Yeah, no, but I just mentioned, so like on many university campuses, that is something that gets protested, like on campus, as if it's something your professors can change, But these kinds of issues, like, the water and the deforestation and pollution and city ordinances, city plans, city political changes, those were things I really could impact and influence. And to me, that seemed like something that was completely morally positive for me to do with my time, as opposed to what was going on, again, basically in left-wing politics in Canada. I didn't have any contact with right-wing politics. Like, right-wing politics also exists, but I mean, I'd never even met those people. It's just downtown Toronto, I didn't see it. Obviously, like, I think the majority of people in Toronto vote for the Conservative Party, so it exists. But I mean, I just say this wasn't really part of my life. There was no temptation for me to join the Young Conservatives. Maybe things would have turned out better for me. I don't know. But look,
I still haven't figured out like what you are.
Yeah, well, I don't fit in Canada. There's no place for me here, and I'm going back to China in a few weeks, so we'll see how that works out. But yeah, we'll come back to what I am if you want in a second. But look, this is me giving you the advice about you and activism in a small town in Southern Ontario. There is no way I could tell you that the town you're born in, or the town your parents own a house in, sorry, you may be born elsewhere, it doesn't matter. But there's no reason why the town you're living in would be the right town for you. And in a lot of ways, Toronto is the wrong city for me. Like, in a lot of ways, it's the wrong place for me to make that commitment. But I think any kind of meaningful activism, it's very humbling to recognize it does require that type of commitment. To say, I'm committed to this place at this time, like for whether it's 10 years, 20 years, or what. And this also reflects why religious organizations have a huge advantage over like vegan organizations or just left-wing organizations. The fact that a church owns property, it owns a building. There's a church and a church basement, and people meet there and play the guitar. I'm not religious at all, as you may have guessed, but I'm just saying the churches have a huge advantage in that. And you can go to that church and you can do fundraising where you say, look, we're really concerned about the drinking water. We'll just stick with the same example. And, here's the map. Here's where the sewage goes in. Here's where our drinking water comes from. This is really a problem we're concerned about, and the city government is doing this. And maybe at that church, maybe there are just 50 people who are sympathetic, willing to listen. You may not even need their money. You may actually need their signatures. Some things in the democratic process, you need 50 people to sign a piece of paper, but maybe they each give you $10. It can make a really big difference. And then to be building that kind of trust with people face to face in one place at one time. That's why historically churches have had this huge advantage. And vegans, by and large, we've started without that kind of infrastructure, without that kind of support. So I see you want to speak, so I'll just finish this sentence. That is also when vegans make the comparison to Martin Luther King Jr., Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., you have to give his full name, they always skip the religious component. The reality is the political power Martin Luther King Jr. had was built on Christianity, was built on Christian churches, was built on the fact that he could go from town to town speaking at churches. And each one of those churches had deep grassroots support from people who knew each other face to face, who trusted each other. They had the potential to make a political difference already before he got there. And of course, he had his own church, he had his own ministry, he had his own status in that. So again, when people say to you, oh, well, look at Martin Luther King Jr. Okay, well, really look. I don't have any of those advantages. I'm a guy on YouTube. You know what I mean? And that is, in some ways, I love it. Like, in some ways, I love the fact that anyone can watch my YouTube channel and get interested and get motivated, and in theory can make a difference in the world. But I'm also really aware of the disadvantages that I've got and that collectively we've got. So, but the implicit point there I was saying is there's no way I can tell you you're living in the right town. It may be the wrong place for you. Maybe you decide, like 1 year from now or whatever, that you hate the town you're living in and you're going to move to Montreal, or you're going to move to Beijing. Like, it could be, or Florida. You decide Sarasota, Florida is where you want to set down roots. But I think the point is, if you want to move somewhere else, even if it's just Montreal, the decision not to be there as a tourist, the decision to say, no, these are my people, this is my problem, this is my responsibility. I'm not just here for fun, I'm not just here to make money. I'm going to set down roots. that, even if it's completely invisible, that's a big change. That's a big difference. That's different from just being there, because all these people go to Thailand. I was talking to vegans who went to Thailand, and they were really being sincere with me. They didn't think there was any poverty. They didn't think there was any prostitution. They didn't think any of these social problems existed. They're seeing it. I can't explain it. They're seeing it just as tourists. But obviously, it's possible to go to Montreal or go to Toronto. We'll stick with Toronto. It's possible to go to Toronto and not see any problems. Definitely, you go to Toronto and you don't see where the drinking water comes from, right? And you don't see the deforestation and the destruction of that river. There can be very obvious problems. When I was there, Toronto actually was running out of drinking water. It's not worth explaining why. It's for technical reasons. Even though Lake Ontario is really big, you can still run out of drinking water. When I was there, Toronto had literally run out of places to put its garbage, and were wasting millions of dollars sending it on trucks to the United States, and a huge distance south of the border. It was a catastrophe financially as well as ecologically, basically due to government incompetence. Obviously, as a tourist, you don't see any of that. But if you're there and you care just a little bit, you see all of it. And I think, obviously, I would give this advice to someone who is non-vegan, but I think it's even more important for vegans, because vegans may think about these issues in an abstract way, like it's only about the whole world, like it's about air pollution on a global scale. And my perspective is, no, it never is. It's always about your town, your 5 friends, your 10 people. Again, it would be your church group if you've got a church group. I don't. It's on that level of local unit organization. That's where the struggle gets fought, and that's where you figure out, if you can live a meaningful life or not. And if you can't, I don't know, you got to move to Montreal, whatever.